In the early hours of March 20th, 2004, the night is bitterly cold and pitch black along Route 118, a lonely ribbon of asphalt that winds through northern Vermont. Rounding a tight bend, a pair of motionless headlights suddenly cuts through the darkness. As you draw closer, you see a car in an eerie position. A pale green sedan has backed straight into the wall of a small, abandoned farmhouse on the roadside. Locals call the place the Dutchburn House. Its windows are boarded over with planks. The impact has knocked one sheet of plywood loose. It now lies half-draped across the trunk of the Oldsmobile. One rear wheel hangs in midair, jammed against the concrete foundation, as if the car reversed violently and climbed onto the base. Everything around the scene is frozen and silent. The doors are closed but unlocked. On the rock-hard ground sit a few scattered coins, an overturned plastic water bottle, and a broken necklace whose links glint faintly in the gloom. Hours earlier, the headlights had still been on, aimed at the bleached-out facade and signaling to the few passers-by that a crash had just occurred. Now, no one is there. No sign of the driver. Only this ghostly car wedged into an empty house under Vermont's frigid sky. The tableau could be straight out of a horror movie, yet it is all too real, and it marks the start of one of Vermont's most unsettling missing person cases. The abandoned car belongs to Brianna Maitland, a 17-year-old who vanished that night. Minutes before, Brianna had left her evening job and was supposed to crash at a friend's place where she'd been staying temporarily. Somewhere on that drive, something, or someone, intercepted her and changed her fate. 21 years have passed, and Brianna's whereabouts remain a complete mystery. To understand how a vibrant teenager could disappear after leaving behind such a surreal scene, you have to step back a few years and learn who Brianna Maitland was. Brianna Alexandra Maitland was born on October 8, 1986, in Burlington, Vermont's largest city, but she grew up in rural Franklin County, near the Canadian border. Her parents, Bruce and Kelly Maitland, raised Brianna and her older brother, Waylon, on a remote farm a few miles from Quebec. The family lived almost off-grid. No television, no microwave, and at times no utility power at all. They heated with wood, pulled water from a well, and cooked on an old stove. The farm was ringed by pastures, sugar maples, and thick woods. As a child, Brianna helped care for the animals, horses, cows, and maybe a few goats whose milk was turned into cheese. In family photos, she's a laughing little girl with long brown braids, wearing boots several sizes too big, scampering through the fragrant barn where hay hung drying from the rafters. Even then, she overflowed with energy and curiosity, as if some distant secret beckoned beyond the green hills of her childhood. Brianna was quick-witted, mischievous, and resourceful, a lively spirit from the very start. She learned to be independent early on, whether it meant splitting wood for the stove or guiding the animals into the barn before nightfall. Life without television fueled her imagination. She devoured books and magazines she found at local yard sales. She would make up stories about superheroes and fearless adventurers. At night, in her small bedroom with walls covered in road maps, she pinned colorful notes on the places she dreamed of visiting. Seattle on the West Coast, Austin in Texas, Montreal just across the border. At Montgomery Elementary, her teachers noticed her dry sense of humor and insatiable curiosity. Brianna also had a big heart. If a classmate got hurt or was crying on the playground, she was the first to improvise a bandage or find the right words to comfort them. People said she could feel others' pain before they even spoke it. Her empathy and bright energy made her instantly likable to everyone around her. As she entered her teenage years, Brianna's free spirit became even more apparent. At 13, she dyed a few strands of her hair turquoise, wore t-shirts featuring alternative rock bands like Nirvana, and filled entire notebooks with poems about shifting identities and the call of wide-open spaces. The gap between the size of her dreams and the limits of rural life started to weigh on her, especially when her childhood best friend moved to Burlington. This friend would send her Polaroids of neon-lit storefronts glowing late into the night, and to Brianna, her family's small town suddenly felt even smaller. To channel her teenage restlessness, Brianna turned to martial arts. She joined a jiu-jitsu club and trained with dedication. Her mix of flexibility and determination earned her a medal at a regional tournament when she was just 14. On the mat, she learned discipline and self-confidence, as well as how to control her strength. By the time she was 17, all Brianna wanted was independence. On her 17th birthday in October 2003, she told her parents she wanted to leave the family farm to live closer to her friends and attend a different high school. Bruce and Kelly, hesitant at first, eventually agreed to let her move in with a friend about 15 miles away. Brianna started attending a new high school farther north, hoping to find an environment that suited her. Every morning before dawn, she would drive her old light green Oldsmobile, proudly inherited from her grandfather. With a thermos of hot chocolate tucked between her knees and punk songs blasting from the radio, she would cover those dark early morning miles to make it to class on time. Despite the early mornings and long drive, she never slacked off. After classes, she would sometimes stay to rehearse scenes for the school play with friends or help younger students who were struggling in math. She was a bright student, earning excellent grades while maintaining her unique flair. Her teachers would smile when they saw the margins of her notebooks decorated with sketches of wild concerts and heroic figures. Brianna was both a model student and a rebellious soul, determined to carve out her own path. But the freedom she craved came with its challenges. Throughout the fall and winter, she moved between friends' houses, trying to find where she truly fit. By early 2004, she moved in with her childhood friend Jillian and Jillian's father. Brianna also decided to leave traditional high school in February 2004 to enroll in a GED program so she could earn her diploma more quickly. At the same time, determined not to depend on her parents, she took on 2 part-time jobs to support herself. At dawn, she worked at a cafe in a nearby town, serving steaming coffee to regulars and sometimes drawing little smiling cats with marker on the paper cups to brighten customers' mornings. In the evenings, she washed dishes and helped wait tables at the Black Lantern Inn, a small family-run restaurant in Montgomery, her hometown area. Her days were a marathon, behind the cafe counter at sunrise, near the inn's kitchen by nightfall. Often, she would drive home very late, alone on the foggy country roads, with only the melancholic voice of Jeff Buckley or the pounding riffs of her favorite bands coming from the speakers of her old car to keep her company. Every tip she earned was carefully saved, slipped into a cow-shaped piggy bank she kept on a shelf. Coin by coin, dollar by dollar, Brianna was fueling the quiet dream she held close. To one day get a small apartment in the city, maybe in Burlington, where she could finally live on her own. On Friday, March 19, 2004, Brianna seemed closer than ever to reaching her goals. That morning, she took her final GED exam at the Enosburg Falls Adult Education Center. Confident, she passed the test with flying colors. To celebrate, her mom, Kelly, took her out for breakfast at a small restaurant. Brianna enjoyed thick, vinyl record-sized pancakes, smiling as they talked about her plans. She spoke about maybe going to college the following year or learning a trade that excited her. She even floated the idea of opening a hair salon with fuchsia-painted walls, a place where she could combine work and creativity. Kelly felt relieved and happy to see her youngest in such a good mood, thriving and looking ahead to the future. After breakfast, the two of them ran a few errands around town. But while they were waiting in line at a store checkout, Brianna suddenly spotted something, or someone, outside. Abruptly, she told her mom she'd be right back and stepped out of the line. Kelly, surprised, let her go. When she found Brianna a few minutes later in the parking lot, her daughter seemed like a different person. Agitated, nervous, her eyes darting away. Kelly looked at her, questioning silently, but didn't push. Brianna brushed it off, saying she needed to get home to get ready for her evening shift at the inn. Around 3:30 p.m., Kelly dropped Brianna off at Jillian's house, the friend she was staying with. Before getting out of the car, Brianna gave her mom a final smile and thanked her for the day. Kelly didn't know it yet, but it would be the last time she would see her daughter. Before heading to work that night, Brianna scribbled a quick note and left it in a visible spot for Jillian, her roommate. "I'll be back after work, probably between 10 and midnight. See you later." She also wrote down the phone number for the Black Lantern Inn on the note, just in case anyone needed to reach her. Brianna then put on her work uniform, a pair of black pants and a neatly pressed black shirt, pulled her hair up into a quick bun, and headed out to the restaurant. On the way, she stopped at the local grocery store to grab a sugary energy drink and a pack of mint gum, hoping it would keep her going late into the night. Then she got back behind the wheel, driving toward Montgomery, ready for her evening shift at the inn. That Friday night, the Black Lantern Inn was serving dinner to about a dozen customers. The atmosphere was warm and uneventful. One table was celebrating a birthday with a surprise cake. A traveler was teasing the waitress about her slight Quebecois accent, and conversations blended cheerfully under the soft glow of the dining room lights. Brianna moved between the kitchen and the dining room with her usual efficiency. Washing dishes, helping serve tables, running orders back and forth, she kept up the pace without missing a beat. She had tucked a pencil into her bun to keep a stray strand of hair in place, and she wore a calm, easy smile. Her coworkers found her in good spirits, just like always, with nothing in her behavior hinting at any trouble. Around 11:00 p.m., the last customers left, complimenting the staff on the meal. Brianna and her coworkers began wiping down tables and closing up for the night. Usually, a coworker would give her a ride home if they finished at the same time, but that evening he had to leave a bit earlier, so Brianna would be driving herself home. She didn't mind. She knew the roads by heart. At 11:20 p.m., Brianna clocked out for the night. Before leaving, some friends invited her to hang out after work, but she politely declined. She had another job to get to the next morning, and she wanted a few hours of rest. She pulled on her dark jacket, stepped out into the cold Vermont night, and took a deep breath of the crisp, pine-scented air. Then she got into her car. Maybe she put on some music for the drive, a rock CD or just the local radio. Around 11:30 p.m., her old green Oldsmobile pulled out of the Black Lantern Inn's parking lot and headed down Route 118 toward Jillian's house. The headlights disappeared into the night. That was the last time anyone who knew her ever saw Brianna Maitland alive. She never made it home that night. Less than an hour after she left, her car was found crashed just a few miles from the Black Lantern Inn. Around 12:15 a.m., a driver heading down Route 118 was stunned to see a car partially lodged into an old abandoned building by the roadside. The Oldsmobile's headlights were still on, casting beams of light into the empty interior of the house through a gap in the wall. The driver slowed down and scanned the darkness, but saw no one, neither in the car nor nearby. Assuming an accident had just happened and that the driver might have gone to find help, he continued on his way without calling the authorities. Around 12:30 a.m., a second passerby drove by the scene. This time, the headlights were off, but he noticed a turn signal still blinking, casting an occasional orange glow across the weathered wooden exterior. Once again, there was no sign of anyone around. The mystery deepened, but this driver also did not contact the police. At about 2:30 a.m., a third driver stopped, curious about the car still sitting there in the dark. By strange coincidence, it was Brianna's ex-boyfriend returning from a night out in Canada and taking that route home. He immediately recognized Brianna's car and felt a stab of worry. But as he looked around, he found no sign of Brianna or anyone else. Maybe, to calm himself, he imagined that Brianna had lost control of the car, but that a friend had already picked her up after the crash. Concerned about the poorly lit road and the risk of another accident, he turned off the turn signal that was still blinking in the emptiness and carefully closed the driver's door, which had been left ajar. Convinced that Brianna was safe somewhere else, he drove away without notifying the authorities. Ironically, he was probably the last person who knew Brianna to pass by the scene of her disappearance, without realizing for a second that something terrible may have happened there. It wasn't until daylight that Brianna's disappearance began to come to light. On the morning of Saturday, March 20th, tourists heading to the ski slopes drove past the crumbling old house. Seeing the car wedged in such a strange position, the travelers pulled over. In the daylight, the scene looked almost surreal. The back end of the sedan was literally lifted up onto the house's foundation, with a piece of plywood hanging off the trunk. The place was still deserted, not a soul in sight. Finding it highly suspicious, the travelers snapped a few photos and quickly called the police to report the wrecked, abandoned vehicle. It was around 1:00 p.m. when the first Vermont State Police officer arrived on the scene. He carefully inspected the inside and the perimeter of the car. No one was around. The officer noted that the driver's side airbag had deployed, a sign of a significant impact, but there was no visible blood anywhere. Lying clearly in view on the front seat were 2 uncashed paychecks made out to Brianna Maitland. Nearby, a crumpled store receipt and an old restaurant slip were scattered on the floor mat, mundane traces of a teenager's everyday life. Brianna's purse was also there, holding her driver's license and a few personal items. There was no cell phone, but it would later come out that Brianna had broken her phone a few days earlier and didn't have it with her. On the back seat, the officer saw a neatly folded white martial arts gi, a pouch filled with drawing pencils, and a half-finished can of energy drink. In the trunk, there were some grocery bags, canned goods, boxes of soup, pet food, things Brianna must have picked up recently. Around the car, in the wet grass where the snow was melting, the officer noticed a few scattered coins, an empty water bottle, and a broken necklace with its clasp snapped. These items seemed to have been dropped or left behind in a hurry. All of these details pointed more toward an accident than a violent assault. Nothing appeared to be missing, except for the driver herself. For the sergeant on the scene, the initial conclusion was straightforward. The driver probably missed the turn during the night, backed into the house, and, shaken but not seriously hurt, left on foot to find help. It wasn't unusual in this rural part of Vermont, especially late in the winter, when icy roads can catch drivers off guard. The license plates revealed the car was registered to Kelly Maitland. The officer found it odd that the owner hadn't reported the car missing, but he didn't know yet that no one was even aware Brianna was gone. Seeing the paychecks with the Black Lantern Inn listed as her employer, the officer tried calling someone at the restaurant to get more information, but it was the weekend, and the place was closed at that hour. With no information suggesting anyone was missing, the officer called for a tow truck, and the Oldsmobile was hauled off to a local garage. A form was left at the station to let the owner know where to retrieve the vehicle. For law enforcement, at that moment, it was just another wrecked car abandoned on the side of a Vermont road. Meanwhile, Brianna's disappearance initially went unnoticed by those close to her. Jillian, her roommate, had left for the weekend on Friday afternoon. When she returned home on Monday, March 22nd, she noticed that the note Brianna had left was still exactly where it had been. Brianna's bed hadn't been slept in, and her belongings hadn't moved. Surprised she hadn't heard from her, Jillian tried calling Brianna's cell phone, but there was no answer. Her worry turned to real concern when she called Kelly, Brianna's mom, to ask if Brianna had returned to the farm. Kelly was blindsided. She had no idea that Brianna hadn't been seen since Friday. Immediately, family and friends sprang into action, calling everyone who might know something. They reached out to classmates, co-workers, and people around town, but no one had seen or heard from Brianna since she left work. The anxiety began to weigh heavily on Bruce and Kelly Maitland as the hours passed with no sign of their daughter. On Tuesday, March 23rd, 4 days after Brianna was last seen, Bruce went to the St. Albans Police Department to file an official missing person report. He explained to the officers that Brianna hadn't made contact since the end of the previous week, which was completely out of character for her. At first, some investigators considered the possibility that Brianna had run away. After all, she was a teenager, had recently left home, and was learning to live independently. Maybe, they thought, she had made an impulsive decision to take off for a few days without telling anyone. But her parents pushed back firmly. Brianna would never just disappear without telling anyone, and she certainly wouldn't leave behind her car, her glasses, and her everyday clothes. Something was wrong. 2 days later, on Thursday, March 25th, a disturbing connection finally emerged. While providing investigators with recent photos of Brianna, Kelly mentioned that her daughter drove a light green 1985 Oldsmobile. One of the officers paused at that detail. It sounded eerily similar to the car that had been found days earlier, backed into an abandoned house. A photo of the crashed car was shown to Bruce and Kelly. Their blood ran cold. It was Brianna's car. In that moment, their world collapsed. The hope that she might have simply had a minor accident and was safe somewhere else shattered. They realized that from the very start, her car had been there, empty, abandoned, and no one knew where Brianna was. In an instant, Brianna Maitland's disappearance shifted from a family's private fear to an active law enforcement investigation. Investigators returned to the scene of the crash, treating every inch of the Dutchburn house and the surrounding property as a potential crime scene. As soon as the connection between the abandoned car and Brianna's disappearance was confirmed, a full-scale search effort was launched. The Maitlands, supported by dozens of community volunteers, began canvassing the Montgomery area, hoping to find Brianna or at least gather any lead that might point to her whereabouts. Fluorescent posters with Brianna's smiling face and the word "missing" in bold black letters were taped to shop windows, pinned to church bulletin boards, and slipped into mailboxes across the region. Volunteer search teams, sometimes accompanied by search dogs, began scouring the woods, riverbanks, and roadside ditches. They checked barns, abandoned farm buildings, hunting cabins. Anywhere a body or someone being held against their will might be found. The Vermont State Police also launched official searches. Helicopters swept over the still partially snow-covered countryside, looking for anything unusual on the ground below. Local farmers checked their fields and outbuildings, just in case. Despite this incredible show of community support, days passed without a single solid lead. No sign of Brianna's clothing found in the brush, no meaningful footprints. It was as if she had vanished into the cold Vermont night. On March 30th, forensic teams finally conducted a full examination of Brianna's Oldsmobile in the lab. The vehicle had been sealed at the garage since authorities realized it was tied to the case. Technicians lifted fingerprints and collected potential biological evidence. No blood was found inside the car. The interior was surprisingly tidy, aside from the previously noted belongings. Nothing that suggested a violent struggle had occurred. Brianna's father pointed out that several essential items of hers were still inside the car. Her glasses, makeup bag, bank card, and her prescription migraine medication she never went without because of her frequent headaches. These were all things Brianna would have taken with her if she had intended to leave for any length of time or go far. These details led investigators to increasingly rule out the theory of a runaway. Publicly, the police announced they now suspected foul play. It was becoming clear that Brianna had likely been the victim of a criminal act on the night she disappeared. As the weeks went by, the small community of Montgomery was in shock. How could a young woman simply disappear on her way home, just minutes from where she was staying? Theories circulated. Some locals believed in a tragic scenario where Brianna, disoriented after the crash, wandered into the woods and succumbed to hypothermia during the freezing night. Others suspected a darker possibility, that Brianna might have accepted a ride from someone offering help, only to have that person harm her. The idea that a stranger could have crossed her path by chance and done something terrible terrified parents and young people in the region. An unsettling coincidence also fueled rumors. Just a month earlier, in February 2004, a college student named Maura Murray had disappeared in the neighboring state of New Hampshire after, once again, a car accident on a rural road. Two young women vanishing under similar circumstances, just weeks apart. Some began to suspect the shadow of a roaming predator hunting along the highways of the Northeast. However, investigators were cautious, publicly stating there was no direct link between the two cases. Soon, a much more local lead began to emerge. As Brianna worked to gain independence, she had recently begun spending time with a small group of people involved in drugs. Friends mentioned that in the past few months, Brianna had experimented with crack cocaine and had been seen at a house in nearby Berkshire, known locally as a drug spot. Less than 4 weeks after Brianna went missing, the police received an alarming anonymous tip. Brianna was allegedly being held against her will in that house by 2 drug dealers she had gotten into trouble with. Not wasting any time, on April 15, 2004, a police team raided the house. They arrested 2 individuals on site, Ramon "Rocky" Ryans and Nathaniel Jackson, drug dealers from New York operating in the area. But the hope of finding Brianna alive vanished instantly. She wasn't there, and there was no evidence she had ever been there. Police seized a large quantity of cocaine, marijuana, and packaging materials, but no sign of Brianna. During questioning, Ryans and Jackson denied having any connection to Brianna's case, claiming they didn't know her and had no knowledge of what had happened to her. Despite this, investigators continued to pursue the lead within the local drug scene, as several details in the case seemed to point in that direction. Later came to light that Brianna had allegedly lent money to one of these men to buy crack, and she had been asking him to pay her back. Some friends also shared that Brianna had expressed fear in the days leading up to her disappearance, though she never said exactly why. Rumors began swirling. Maybe Brianna had witnessed something she wasn't supposed to see, or maybe she owed money to the wrong people. Investigators started looking into everyone who had conflicts with Brianna. They discovered that in February 2004, just weeks before she went missing, Brianna had been assaulted at a party by a former classmate, reportedly jealous over the attention a boy was giving Brianna. During that altercation, Brianna, who, despite her jiu-jitsu training, had refused to fight back, was punched several times in the face, leaving her with a broken nose and a concussion. She filed a police report against the young woman, whose name was Kiali, but the case was still pending at the time of Brianna's disappearance. It was eventually dismissed when Brianna stopped showing up for hearings. Some wondered if this personal enemy might have sought revenge. However, when police questioned the young woman, they quickly confirmed she had no connection to Brianna's disappearance and had a solid alibi for the night of March 19th. That lead was ruled out. As the months passed, Brianna Maitland's case began to attract media attention beyond Vermont. In July 2004, the TV show America's Most Wanted aired a segment on Brianna's disappearance, hoping to generate new leads. Calls came in from all over the country. For a brief moment, hope flickered. Several people claimed they had seen a young woman matching Brianna's description wandering the streets of Atlantic City, New Jersey. There was also a reported sighting in Portland, Oregon, clear across the country. Police followed up on every lead. Surveillance videos were pulled where possible. But none of these leads panned out. The woman seen in Atlantic City was identified, and it wasn't Brianna. The other tips led to dead ends as well. At the same time, darker rumors surfaced. Local inmates passed along stories they had heard in jail, that Brianna had gotten into trouble with some dealers, and someone hurt her over a debt. An anonymous letter arrived at the police station, apparently written by a woman familiar with the drug scene. The letter described in chilling detail what supposedly happened to Brianna, that she had been killed in a violent outburst about a week after her disappearance by one of the drug dealers she knew. Her body, the letter claimed, had been temporarily hidden in a basement before being dismembered and disposed of in a pig farm so it would never be found. These horrifying allegations remained unverified. Police couldn't corroborate these extreme claims, lacking any concrete information about the location or identities of those allegedly involved. Still, every detail in the letter was taken seriously and investigated as far as possible. Investigators searched the basement of a house indirectly mentioned in the letter, but found nothing conclusive. With no solid answers, the Maitland family turned to less conventional methods. A psychic offered to help, claiming to have visions of metal walls around Brianna, suggesting she was locked inside a shipping container or trailer. Desperate for any lead, the family listened, but there was nothing actionable they could pursue. In the years that followed, dozens upon dozens of tips, ranging from credible to bizarre, were investigated. People reported seeing Brianna on a bus, living under a fake name somewhere, or claimed her body had been dumped in a lake. Police were overwhelmed by the flood of anonymous calls and theories, but each one ended in a dead end. Every spark of hope was quickly extinguished by reality. Years passed, and Brianna Maitland's case remained unsolved. In 2005, Brianna's parents launched a website, bringbrihome.org, to centralize information and appeal for tips. A reward of up to $20,000 was offered, funded through donations and community support, for any information that could lead to finding Brianna or understanding what happened to her. But the months, and then years, continued to pass without any decisive breakthrough. In 2006, there was a brief surge of hope when a security camera at Caesars Casino in Atlantic City captured footage of a young woman who bore a striking resemblance to Brianna, sitting at a poker table. Police obtained the video and analyzed it frame by frame. When Brianna's parents viewed it, they were struck by the woman's profile. The same dark hair pulled back, the same high cheekbones. But the woman in the video was never formally identified, and the possibility that it was Brianna could neither be confirmed nor definitively ruled out. In 2007, the FBI issued a nationwide missing person alert for Brianna Maitland, while the case, still open, began receiving attention from detectives specializing in cold cases. Some investigators even began to consider the theory that the scene of Brianna's car backed into the abandoned house had been deliberately staged by her abductors to make it look like a simple accident. This idea added weight to the theory that Brianna had been the victim of a planned attack. Bruce and Kelly, for their part, publicly stated that they believed multiple people must have been involved in whatever happened to their daughter. They felt that a single attacker would have struggled to overpower Brianna, given her martial arts training. In December 2011, the investigation Discovery series Disappeared aired a full episode on Brianna's case, titled Vanished in Vermont. The renewed media attention briefly brought the case back into the spotlight. New calls came in, some rehashing details already known, others offering little more than speculation. Each time, investigators checked and cross-checked, only to find themselves back at square one. The media attention would flare up and then fade again, resurfacing around the anniversaries of Brianna's disappearance or when human remains were found somewhere in the U.S. Each time, the family braced for the worst, only to learn that the remains did not belong to Brianna. In July 2016, a sad twist erased a symbol of the case. The old Dutchburn house, already crumbling, was destroyed in an accidental fire. The building, site of the last trace of Brianna, collapsed into ashes without ever giving up its secrets. That same year, on the 12th anniversary of Brianna's disappearance, authorities announced they had extracted an unknown DNA sample from an item found in Brianna's car. For a while, there was hope that modern DNA analysis might finally give them a name, but for years, the partial DNA profile did not match anyone in criminal databases. It wasn't until 2022, 18 years after Brianna vanished, that a breakthrough came. The lab was finally able to identify the mysterious DNA. It belonged to a person who had been interviewed long ago during the investigation. Authorities did not release the name, but clarified that the individual had fully cooperated and was not charged, a way of saying that, sadly, the discovery did not bring them any closer to answers. In 2019, the case returned to local headlines when a former classmate of Brianna's publicly claimed she knew the truth. According to her, 2 men from the area had made Breezy disappear one night, Breezy being Brianna's affectionate nickname. This claim briefly reignited the investigation. Police searched a location she mentioned, an old sealed well on a property not far from the Maitland farm, where the woman claimed Brianna's body had been hidden. Teams pumped out the stagnant water and explored the bottom of the well, hoping to find remains. Once again, they found nothing. The 2019 claim became another false hope added to the growing list. In March 2024, for the 20th anniversary of Brianna Maitland's disappearance, an extraordinary press conference was held. The FBI, assisting Vermont State Police on the case, announced a new $40,000 reward for any information leading to Brianna's location or the recovery of her remains. 20 years is too long, said the special agent in charge of the local office, urging anyone who had been holding on to a secret since 2004 to come forward. Investigators emphasized that they did not consider the case cold, but an active, open investigation. Despite the heavy passage of time, they said, they continue to pursue every lead. Today, 21 years have passed. Brianna Maitland would be 38 years old, but for her family, she remains forever a 17-year-old frozen in time. Bruce and Kelly have learned to live with the absence, but they have never stopped searching for her. Bruce still hands out flyers and talks about Brianna to anyone who will listen, whether at a music festival in Stowe or at a local farmer's market. Kelly, for her part, plants a sunflower in her garden each year on Brianna's birthday in October to honor the memory of her bright, spirited Breezy, who was born on a crisp autumn day in 1986. On Route 118, the old, crumbling Dutchburn house is no longer there to bear witness, but the place remains etched in people's minds. At that fatal curve, some drivers still instinctively slow down, knowing the unresolved tragedy that unfolded there. A handmade sign, placed near where the Dutchburn property once stood, bears in painted letters the question that haunts the entire region. Where is Breezy? The seasons continue to pass in northern Vermont. In fall, the maples set the road ablaze with red and gold, and in winter, tall drifts of snow carve silent white corridors along the barns. But for the Maitland family, every year without answers feels like another winter in their hearts. Brianna Maitland's case remains open. Investigators hope that one day an anonymous tip will come in, or a technological breakthrough will help piece together the puzzle of that fateful night. Perhaps a genealogy match, an algorithm analyzing forgotten surveillance footage, or a new review of old phone records will finally unlock the mystery. Until that day, Brianna remains missing, her absence echoing endlessly. She is remembered with her half-shy, half-rebellious smile, her dreams of adventure, and her innate kindness. Her story is a stark reminder that a car can become a ghost ship in a matter of minutes, sailing off into the unknown, and that 2 uncashed paychecks can remain the last markers of a life abruptly halted, suspended forever in the cold March night.